Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am said Forest. How's it going? Thank you for joining us, for subscribing, and for listening. This week we have Peter Broderick, the amazing artist, musician, and raconteur of all things creative. He is back on the show. I believe he was episode 80 the first time that he was here. And I love talking to Peter. He's easy to talk to, and he's a sweet guy, and he's a lot of fun, which you'll particularly see at the end of this podcast when he did something no other podcast has ever prodded me to do. He's like, hey, before we go, can we sing together? So we sang together, and we each turned on some effects on our voice, and I gotta say, it was really fun. It was really fun to make some spontaneous music in real time over a podcast. So stick around for the end. I just got back from New York City. Rada was there, and I was visiting with my dear friend Mark G. of Mark Tom Photography, who's been doing a lot of video and photography work for me lately. Known him for a long time. And my dear brother Louis and Janny up in upstate New York. And we did all sorts of things. We went over to the 1RPM studios to shoot some live stuff, some live versions of some songs from Possible, and some other B-roll and photography around the city. And we worked on a music video for Undying that Mark's directing, and got upstate and had these wonderful meetings. We met up with Julie Holland, who's also on the podcast, at her home, and went swimming in a lake there, and went over to Reconsider, which is doing some amazing work. It's being organized. Reconsider's bought some land up there, and they have all sorts of interesting plans, but they are some of the executive producers of Fantastic Fungi, which is a wonderful movie if you haven't seen it yet. But anyway, it's a great trip, and I have a soft spot for New York in the summer, and the weather was great, and things were starting to open up, and I could just see the elation on people's faces as they were out and about on the streets of New York. And it was great to share that space with Rada. It's sort of like a past life of mine, and it's just fun to drop in. So feeling tired, but somewhat renewed by seeing those old friends and old faces, and just kind of getting back into things over here. One of the things I'm working on is some meditations for a field trip, because if you haven't noticed, they are exclusively hosting some content that I created right now on their Trip app. So it's free to download the Trip app by Field Trip Health. And Field Trip, as you know, Ronan was on the podcast not too long ago. They're working on ketamine clinics and therapy, and probably, I would assume, moving into the psilocybin space in the future. And I'm very interested in providing music as a way of guiding people through these experiences, as there's not a lot that exists out there, and certainly there's just not a lot that's specific for that psychedelic experience. So I have an album called In, a soundtrack for the Psychedelic Practitioner, Volume 2. That is essentially what it says it is. It is a soundtrack. It is like a volume 2 of Music for Mushrooms, except this piece of music is 2 hours. And it's a fully connected journey, and is recorded from the sessions that we did, the live stream ceremonies on YouTube Live from the pandemic. I curated recordings from those improvised live ceremonies and created a new piece that is called In. So if you want to check it out now, all you have to do is download that Field Trip app, which is, again, as far as I know, totally free, and you can just head over there to that section with the meditations and music and hit go. And I am going to be creating a few new guided meditations that will also be on that app that relate to that listening experience that I think you're really going to like, and I'm working on wrapping those up right now. The only other pieces of business is just to say that Tabula Rasa, of course, came out yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this. And the full album, the full Possible album, will culminate in July 23rd, where we'll give you all 11 tracks. Thank you for your support and patience as we roll this out and have a conversation through music and meaning together. But you can get the vinyl now. You can pre-order that before it's gone. It's this beautiful iridescent blue vinyl. You can do that over at only at eastforest.org in the store there. You can pre-order that, and that's where you can get the perfume oils. And if you'd like to get any other stuff in the store, it's always appreciates that support. As well as we have these new two pieces of clothing: this sort of modern, lightweight, super soft sweatshirt and a women's tank with the beautiful Ouroboros artwork from the Possible album that was illustrated by Evan Lawrenson. So check that out. And thank you to our council members at the East Forest Council. Those are the folks at patreon.com/eastforest who are extra supporters of this podcast and the East Forest work in general. If you'd like to check that out, just either go to my website or patreon.com/eastforest and see what you think. We have a monthly Zoom council right now that you might want to join. We also have podcast extras, music exclusives, and other mechanisms of introspection and inner joy. So see if that's your jam, and thank you again to everyone who is part of that council, and welcome to this new episode. And on that note, let's dive into this. This is our dear friend Peter Broderick coming all the way from the other side of the Atlantic, depending on where you are right now. Let's do it.
Did you know that the dandelions got real tasty?
Peter Broderick, welcome back.
Thank you, Krishna. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah. So remind us, you're in Ireland?
I am. I think the last time we spoke, I was in London. I moved over to Ireland from West Coast America, Oregon in 2016, but then spent a few years in Ireland, and then my partner and I went over to London to try and, because we both travel a lot for music and stuff, so we thought it'd be handy to live in the city for a while. And then, of course, I think the last time we spoke was late 2019. So I was fresh over in London. And then, beginning of 2020, a lot of things changed. And when all the lockdowns and stuff started, we made a run back to rural Ireland, which I think was a good move.
That's where your partner's from, right?
Yeah. Well, she was actually born in London, but to an Irish family. There's a lot of like little bubbles in London of like, Irish communities it's all Irish people, but they all are in one part of London. So she was born there and then, grew up partly there and partly over here in the west of Ireland.
Yeah. Last time we spoke, I guess it was pre-pandemic. Was it?
It was, because I just recently went back and checked out our last interview just to make sure I didn't tell this like the same exact story twice.
Yeah.
But it was late 2019. Yeah.
Because I remember you were telling me how you were really getting into foraging and sort of things that I would think would come along with being in a more rural location, which is sort of prescient of pre-pandemic, like almost like you could sense a change coming in your body, and you're like, and I'm imagining you just deepened that as when the touring stopped.
Yes, absolutely. And as I was really getting into foraging and just plants and being out in nature, so moving over to London was already a bit of a heartbreak, but I managed to find there's actually a lot of green space in London, a lot of big parks, especially in the south where we were living. So I did a surprising amount of foraging even while I was there. But yes, since touring has stopped, last summer, even into the winter, and especially now that spring's back in, I was telling you right before we hit record that I was almost late because I was outside. I was actually doing an experiment making paper out of grass. So so I was out there.
How did it go? How does your experiment? Did you make some paper?
I think so. I'm waiting for it to dry now. But it's just out of grass that grows in the local bog here. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of that, and like what you said, it's almost as if my body could sense it or something. I have to say that like when all the lockdowns started, and I don't know how it was over there in the States, but over in London and over here, there was a lot of people were kind of scared because a lot of the shelves in the supermarkets were like empty.
Yeah, here too. Yeah.
And that made a lot of people panic. But because I had spent the last few years learning what's edible that grows wild in this climate,
Yeah.
I felt this strange sense of security of not being freaked out if I can't get something. It would still be a struggle for me to survive, but I would be so determined to do it, and I feel like I'd find a way with the knowledge that I have already. If I couldn't go to the supermarket.
Yeah, man. Any kind of resiliency, it's a diversification of your food source. It makes me think of Dave Holliday, who was on this podcast a few episodes back, who's a friend of mine from down in southern Utah. And he is a primitive skills guy, and he had wanted to live like a caveman for a summer or a season, but he did it for a month. And it's sort of a similar idea. It's like for him, it's enjoyable and getting connected back to the land for him. But there's this recognition that of how little that he actually needed and how he could get a lot of it. He wasn't allowed to use anything made of metal unless he essentially forged it himself, and no electronics or cars or anything like that. Clearly, couldn't be in a house or a home or anything of that nature. It's just only like what was available from Stone Age times. And there's something to be said for like knowing the food that is around you. I'd imagine that gives you a sense of, like we said, resiliency. Sort of like you're not just reliant on what's brought to the store.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting process for me because, my upbringing and education growing up in small town America was like, look at what the primitive people used to do, and and look at all the different gods they believed in. And as I've gotten older, now I kind of look at those like indigenous cultures. I have a tendency to almost overly romanticize them now because I was brought up to sort of disregard them as some sort of primitive, unevolved people. But when I came to realize on my own that, wait a second, maybe people that live in this way, so connected to Mother Nature and the cycles of the earth, and maybe we've lost touch with something very important that these people are in touch with. And so I've kind of been sort of diving back that way as much as I could, almost to the point sometimes where, I've, I refused to get engaged in social media for so many years. But it's actually, since I think the last time we spoke, I wasn't using any social media and hadn't for so long. But in the last year, I've sort of started to try and fuse both of these worlds together, both the look back to the ancient and also look towards the futuristic, and take what you can from both and fuse together.
How's that going, man? It's a slippery slope. You're like, I'm just going to put my toe into the social media waters. I mean, that is a world where the best minds on this planet are like, how can we manipulate your brain to just hook you in? And I mean, really, it's not easy.
Something really scary happened like a week or two into getting Instagram, which is less than a year ago now that I first started using Instagram. A week or two into it, I thought, you know what? Now I'm going to take a week off. I've dipped into it a little bit. Now I want to take a week off and just make sure I sort of keep this at bay, that I'm using it and it's not using me. And so I decided I'm going to take a week off. But for the first 2 days, and this is only after having used it for a couple weeks, mind you, for the first 2 days, the number of times I went to my phone, opened the app, and only then realized what I was doing.
That you had done it. Yeah. You're just like, oh my God, I have a cigarette in my hand.
Wait a second. I'm not doing this week. And that happened, several times throughout the first 2 days. And it did taper off after a couple days. But that says something, doesn't it?
It's super powerful. I mean, it really is. Like, I mean, I've talked about this many times, just about I don't think we fully realize what it's doing to us, and things like the social dilemma. I don't know if you saw that documentary.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't, but
incredible.
but I heard a lot about it, and I feel like I know what it is already. Although it probably would be a good idea for me to
I
watch it.
was the same way.
Yeah.
I thought, I was like, oh, I know all this, and I even knew a lot of people who were talking in it. But then when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I learned even more, and it really put it together in a way that's
Mm.
pretty frightening about just the rise of populism and polarization, and sort of the connection to. It's basically our addictive patterns in our brains and social media, and how
Yeah.
it's sort of creating these polarizing narratives for us that really didn't exist in quite the same severity before. So,
Mm.
but I was going to ask you about this deepening into the foraging and how that bleeds into your work. And I also saw that you released an album a bit back after we spoke that had to do with like blackberries all around. And I was like, oh, it is bleeding into your work. It seemed like this
Yeah.
deepening into nature and the land and the ruralness.
Absolutely. Well, I think I wondered for a while. For a while, it felt like, okay, I do music, and my other main passion is this foraging stuff. And for a while, they kind of felt like two separate ventures. But yeah, the last record I put out, they did sort of come together without me even really trying too hard. It seemed like actually the foraging stuff had so much fused into who I am, at least the story I'm telling myself of who I am, and it just came out in the music. And sometimes in a really literal way, and sometimes in a less literal way. For instance, there's a song on there called "Wild Food," and it's kind of like I think of it as an educational song for almost for kids. It came originally from an idea of I thought, wouldn't it be great to do an educational album where like each song is about a different plant in the wild that grows very commonly, that like dandelion. A lot of kids don't realize that the dandelions growing in your yard you can eat and have a lot of great medicinal properties. And so I thought maybe I could do an album, but it all got condensed into this one song called Wild Food.
Mm-hmm.
And the title itself, Blackberry, is very has a lot of meaning for me, because when I first started getting into foraging, I was I was one of those people who didn't realize that a dandelion is like a superfood. Not only is it not a pest weed. I mean, you could certainly choose to see it that way if you're trying to grow a garden and the dandelions are coming up and your broccoli isn't. but
Yeah.
but dandelions are they were the first kind of thing I fell in love with, because here's something that I was paid by my parents to take out of the yard when I was a kid and like toss into the compost.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I was cherishing it as a food and a medicine, and a friend. Um, so I got really excited about all these plants that grow right around us that I didn't realize before I could utilize and have a relationship with. But the blackberry was the only one that I knew. I feel like most kids in America growing up, they have an experience picking blackberries. They're so common, they're so easy to identify, they're so prevalent. Please tell me you picked blackberries as a kid.
Yeah, and it's
Oh yeah,
also a really intense plant, like
super
when
intense.
yeah, really intense. Like it's sort of dangerous. It's like an impenetrable wall,
Yeah, yeah.
and yes, I love blackberries. And growing up in Oregon, we both grew up in Oregon, and they're everywhere. That's a good memory of the summers.
Right. So there is a plant that you have wild food foraging experience. That is the same experience that our ancestor hunter gatherers had. Going out, they might have procured all their food in that way, finding it in the nature with little to no cultivation. But so I started to when I first got into foraging, I wasn't excited about the blackberry because it's the only one I knew already. I was excited about all these other things, but after years of foraging, all of a sudden I got fascinated in the blackberry. It started when I saw something online about how you can weave with blackberry vines. You can use them as a weaving material. And I started picking getting all these blackberry vines and making all these baskets. And this culminated, I still do it now, but these efforts culminated in making a hat. I made a hat out of blackberry vines. Kind of looks like a straw hat, but you can see me
Assuming you take the thorns off, you use a knife to scrape them off, or what do you do?
The best thing to do is just cut the vine and grab a thick pair of leather gloves or just a really thick canvas cloth or something, and just run your hand along the vine, grip it tightly, and strip the vine. And this will take off all the leaves. Some of the thorns stay on, but I love, like, when you have a finished basket that has all these gnarled thorns all over it. You know, your hands are going to get bloody along the way, but how cool does that look?
It's cool. A hat with thorns.
Yes.
It's very like biblical. I mean,
Yes. So I realized that, you know, not only are the berries great, but you can use it for weaving. Also, the leaves make a really delicious herbal tea. You can use blackberry fibers to make cordage. So it's an incredibly versatile plant. And not only that, it is everywhere. It grows like I was saying that I did a fair amount of foraging in London. One of the things I foraged most was blackberries. Any backside of an overgrown park or an alleyway that was kind of left alone for a while, the blackberries come in. And I started to see the blackberry as this character so imagine us modern humans sort of losing touch with our ancient life way. You know, we all go to the supermarket and we get our stuff, and hardly anybody knows what those plants look like when they're growing, let alone the wild version of that plant that it came from originally. But the blackberry is this character that we all still know. I see it as this connection between modern lifestyle and the ancient lifestyle. It's still there. I see it as like Mother Nature holding on, like, don't forget me. Like, at the very least, keep on eating these blackberries. You'll have at least a taste of this wild nature in you, you know? And
it's a vine, right?
It is a vine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that realization just, it feels very powerful to me, and I continue to regard the blackberry with this very special sort of reverence.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, you have I saw on your website a new podcast, and I feel like, is this sort of like what the podcast is? Like and I feel like at this point, I'm hoping I can play a clip of that song at the end, because it would make sense. You know, we're talking about I've heard it, but it'd be great if we can, like, we're kind of diving into like why you made it, where it came from, what the meaning is, and it seems to be not just a love affair of like your own process of discovering your own connection to the land, but like you said, it's a kind of vine that continues to weave its way into modern life, and it's like a reminder of our past, or our humanity.
Yeah, or a connection to it, you know, that past is still here with us now.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about this podcast, because isn't it, you've launched it, right?
I just put out the first episode yesterday. And, you know, it's something I grappled with for quite some time, like my resistance to go into Instagram. You know, I had a resistance. I kind of thought, like, well, I made this joke when I put out the podcast yesterday. I said, I've had a lot of time to reflect over the last year as to, you know, what I'm doing and how I can best be of service. And after much contemplation, I realized that what the world needs most right now is another dude with a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you so,
I feel the same way.
right.
I keep trucking, but
That's right, because somehow you've found that this is a very useful thing, and I believe it is. So I was reluctant for a while, but I had this idea to just start a podcast called One Song, where each episode is about one song, and you talk to either the person who wrote that song or just somebody who really loves the song, and you sort of just talk about the story of the song. Where did it come from? What's the story of the song? Did it change from when it was first written to, all the life it's had when it was played on stage? And has it been covered by other people? And how was it recorded and where? And basically, the conversation can go anywhere, but it always comes back to this one song. And we listen to different versions of the song. And so it's a simple idea. I'm just trying it out at the moment, but we'll see where it goes.
I dig it. Yeah, it's sort of like Song Exploder meets what's the StoryCorps in a way.
Someone wrote to me yesterday and they said, "Do you know Song Exploder?" And I said, "Oh no, did I steal their idea?" But that seems to be more about technical building of like a song in a very technical kind of way. Am I right?
And that's not a unique idea. I mean, it's like it's
Right.
behind the music basically, and it's like VH1 style.
Yeah.
It's just like let's get into a song and talk about why and how it was made. With an
Yeah,
artist.
absolutely. And I think, just for someone like me who has devoted the last, decade and a half to touring around the globe and playing music, just with all the different musicians I've met, it's kind of just like a nice excuse to just to connect with some of those people and bring a greater context to, a single song.
Dude, you know a lot of amazing musicians. I think sharing that friendship and those connections with other people in the world
Yeah.
would be a benefit for all of us. So I'm all
Cool.
for it. I think it'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the
Yeah.
encouragement, Krishna. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of touring and how much you've done and everything you've been doing, as things have been changing, like how are you feeling about the state of yourself in this greater music ecosystem? It sounds like well, before I tell you how you feel, like how are you feeling? Where are you looking? What's your outlook on the future?
Well, I'm an optimistic person. I always kind of I have my down times like anybody, but I just am so I just feel so passionate about the things that I'm in love with that I just have so much energy to put into those things, and I see I don't know. I feel almost like it's difficult to say positive things amidst such a terrible situation. I think anyone who is feeling super positive right now might feel reluctant to say it too loudly because there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of sickness and so yeah, I don't want to. I want to, be able to honor all of that as well. But yeah, for me, it's been a real blessing to have this break. As a touring musician, it's quite a grind. It's a tough lifestyle traveling around all the time. It's not super good for your body. You find weird bits of food. You get inconsistency with your food and your sleep, and it wears you down a bit. So I think I wouldn't have stopped it of myself. I needed something like this to just press the pause
Yeah.
button for me, and I've tried to make the most of that and take it as a time. In fact, the longer this situation goes on, the more I question how much I want to go back to the lifestyle I was doing, and that I see a great possibility in that questioning of it. Like, well, how else could we do this work as musicians and creative people? How else could we approach this? That's exciting to me.
I feel exactly the same thing. And it's hard because I also would not have stopped without the entire world stopping. Like, and I also feel the pull to, like, when certain opportunities come up and I see things kind of trickling in, and I see like discussions I'm having either with myself or others about things in the future, whether it's a year off or something, and I want it to feel more like a journey, because it is. It does feel like such a journey now. It doesn't feel like a quick trip, or it's like, I'll just go do this thing, come back. I'm like, it's such a huge outlay of energy. And
Yeah.
that hamster wheel you're alluding to, it's not just for me the actual travel and the performance. That's a huge part of it. But it's also the preparation and the rehearsal. Like if I have a gig in 3 weeks or something, I'm preparing, and like it's part of now my day, and my hours of each day is like, whether it's whatever it is, there's rehearsal and preparation involved. That's a huge outlay of energy that on one hand, it's sort of like a kind of calisthenics. And I think it keeps me sharper as a musician, and it forces me to stay engaged in work and not be not doing music. But on the other hand, I recognize that it's sort of this thing that just eats up a lot of my brain cycles and hours of the day. And I'm not trying to say that's bad or good. I just noticed that like it's a kind of pressure, and I'm trying to find a way that I'm like, how can I stay engaged and keep the forward movement that I want, but also not have that just be constant. It's just all the time. There's always something I'm preparing for, and then traveling and performing.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. And I don't know, man. I think there's definitely a part of me as well that kind of looks at this whole phenomenon of a musician on stage and a crowd sort of watching, sort of, physically below this musician
Right.
who's up on a pedestal. And there's a part of me that thinks, what a weird way to share music. And this ties into what I was saying about, romanticizing more indigenous type of cultures, where I can't imagine music being used in that way. It would be a communal thing. Everybody's singing and dancing together. There's no one up on a stage commanding everyone's attention for hours at a time. But I think it all has its place. Sorry, you want to say something there?
Well, I was just going to say, you're right. We abdicated we said, okay, yeah, everybody can sing, but we changed a while back. We said, I'll pay someone else to sing for me.
Yes.
Essentially. And we said, I don't do that anymore. But it's like, we all can. We all really can make music, whether you think someone does it better. But we did switch into this entertainment role where we pay people to do it better for us.
Absolutely. And I think, I also think in different, I remember when I was first coming up touring in America, and I was touring in this band with this drummer, a woman who was a good 15, 20 years older than me. And she said, Peter, you're gonna love it over in Europe if you ever get over there. She said, in America they treat music like entertainers, but in Europe they treat musicians like artists. And I thought, wow, and
what a trip!
Yeah. And so there's different ways. I feel like it's become more homogenized, just even in the last 15 years when I've been touring around the world. But there are sort of different mindsets toward this stuff. But yeah, it's like, it is strange that at some point we made that decision to pay. Like, did that co-evolve with the advent of like agriculture, where here, I've grown a bunch of potatoes and I own all these potatoes now, and I'm gonna hire someone to watch over my potatoes so that nobody steals them, and then I'm good to go for the next few months or whatever. And also I'll sell a few on, and now I can pay someone to do my singing for me.
Right. There's a line of a lineage there for sure. You could trace it back to the first fire at the Stone Age,
Right.
where we said now we control nature, and to all the way to now. But I started doing these concerts before the pandemic where I was in the middle of the room and it's in the round. And it was part of the energy of breaking down the proscenium. And it's sort of like, hey, we're in this experience together. And the energy of it can feel in a way more co-creative because we all know as performers, it very much is. Like if it's a rough audience, it's so hard to, even if there's like a couple people talking, there could be 1,000 people in the room and there's 2 people right in front of you on their phones or something. And it's like going back and forth. And it just sucks it right. They're vampires of energy. And it's just so difficult to, they have a lot of influence and power on a performance just with the gift of someone's attention is huge. You know, if they really are present with you, you feel freedom as a performer to really then just give back.
Yeah. One thing that I've almost always done since I started performing a lot is, if I'm up on a stage at some point in the show, in the middle of the show, I'll, take off or get away from whatever instrument I'm playing and sing and walk off the stage and walk through the room and sing. And you can feel this like invisible wall between the stage and the audience go shoo, poof. And it's super weird for a moment, but it almost always has a really positive and wholesome effect.
Do you get them to sing with you, or are you just sort of non-amplification? You're just singing in the room?
Most of the time, I try not to. There's a fine line with audience participation for me because on one hand, I think, if someone's paid, 20 euros to come see this show, I should be the one singing. They paid me to. Let's not ask them to do the work. But when you do, so it can be such a great thing when you do all sing along. And I just was thinking while you were talking there that, maybe as well an interesting way to look at the role of a musician, and I think you'd probably agree with this, is, less of an entertainer and more of, I don't want to sound pretentious or presumptuous, but like almost more of a doctor or a healer. It's a therapy. You come there because, and I think that's what music is for a lot of people who work in a job that maybe isn't that fun. And in the night, you might go and view a concert, and it's a completely therapeutic medicine, really. So maybe that's a nice way of seeing that role of the person, because you would go to a healer or a doctor or whoever you go to, your acupuncturist, you would go to them and pay them for their service, or somehow, you might trade something, but you're going to give something for them to, heal you or give you some sort of therapy.
I see it like a weaver in a way, or it's a. Let me use a different kind of analogy, so we're not sounding too pretentious. I was saying to a friend who's a comedian, a different kind of performer. I was like, I really feel like comedians in the modern era are like the shamans of our time, because they're the ones who are the ultimate tricksters, who are up there. I mean, laughter is sort of like creativity, and it's utterly unique to human beings as far as we know. It's like this amazing thing we take for granted that what is funny? Like what is this sense of humor and this ability to reflect on something and see it in a different way? And now it's like it's the cosmic joke personified in a way, like one of the greatest aspects of God and creation in the universe, this idea of like, it's all a joke. Yeah. It's all deadly serious, but it's also, it's kind of silly, that trickster energy that is a through line of everything. And it's so much a through line in the same way music is that through line. It's everywhere. It's just like water for fish. And so comedians these days feel like they're playing this important role of allowing us to laugh at ourselves and see the absurdity of it and just like poke a finger in. And there is clearly a kind of healing in that, a kind of catharsis in that, and a kind of like, hey, wake up. Don't take it too seriously. Yeah. And musicians do this in a different way, but absolutely it's a kind of catharsis, an emotional healing, a kind of therapy And so in some ways, when you're on stage performing, it's kind of like you're coaxing something. You have to kind of read for yourself and the people in the room, like, what is wanting to happen and how can I try and bring that forth, that energy, whether, through what you do. And you're right, breaking down some of those walls in a lot of ways is a way of sort of breaking the spell. And maybe, it's a shock to the system.
Yeah. Oh, this actually ties into there was one thing that kind of popped into my mind while sort of anticipating this conversation with you. There was one thing that popped into my mind that I thought might be interesting to discuss. And that is, how shall I frame this? In the music world that I've been a part of, not that, that's an entirely different world from what you or anybody else is a part of, but I feel like the music world that I've been a part of is largely secular. Do you know what I mean?
It's a great conversation. I think about this a lot.
It leaves out, and it also ties into how I was raised, my education, where we kind of very purposefully, which came about for some real good reasons. There was corruption in the church, in religion. So some people said, well, let's take that part out and let people be free to practice their spirituality or lack of in whatever way they want personally. So I see the good intention in that, but I also start to feel like there's a void. There's a bit of a void when there's no acknowledgement of this sort of spiritual and amazingly enough, it's still hard for me to say spiritual without feeling like without feeling kind of silly about it because I was raised in this world that was so secular and left that part out. And the music world, especially, like if you think of all the top cool, hip, trendy music websites and publications, it's, for lack of a better word, it's all so secular. And
secular technically means not spiritual, or it's almost like devoid of spirituality. And I used to use that word for a thing to mean non-religious.
Right.
I was like, oh, it's a very different term, and I think it's an important distinction.
Yeah, and so I was just thinking about, how we were talking about how you might go to a concert as a sort of therapy for your spirit, for your soul. It's a very spiritual experience, I think. To have that transcendent experience with music is a very spiritual thing, and yet it's so unacknowledged in a lot of the music world that I've been in, and it's almost like a no-go zone. You don't, yeah. And maybe,
why is that though? And I want to talk about this because I know to some degree the world you're in, because it's a world that I looked in on from the outside for many years.
Yeah.
And going back before East Forest, 13 years ago, when I was in more like piano pop, in my 20s, really trying to like make it, and really trying to have that affirmation from the, let's say, industry at large.
Yeah.
And when I started to have my own personal revelations about what music was for me and where it took me, and I understand the word spiritual is just a word, and I know it's quite loaded, let's say, just like the word God is even more. But at the end of the day, what we're speaking about is music has this incredible ability just to deepen your sense of what it means to be alive and what all the crazy nature of being a human being. And it does this for everybody, whether they recognize it or not, whether it's metal or country or classical. It basically it enlivens things in you that feel good. It feels good to dig into all these emotional states. To me, that is deeply spiritual. And that word just means I feel larger than just my identified self in my head. Like I feel like, yes, there's more to life. There's more.
Yeah.
And So when I started to make music that was for myself, that the experiences I had were so powerful with psilocybin at first in my music that was just for me.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't, it was such a bomb internally that I was like, I'd be an idiot to just ignore that and not talk about it and not do this because it was important to me. But there was an utter rejection
Yeah.
from the rest of the music industry of like, oh, it's new age. You're just new age now. Or, oh, it's yoga music. You're just you're a DJ. You're a yoga DJ. And I was like, I've never DJed a day in my life. But that was the narrative that was being told about. And it just relegated, it's no longer good music. And I had this chip on my shoulder for many years. I'll be honest, I think I still have it, that I still have to work with this, where I'm like, I want my music to be just as enjoyed as any other quote unquote good accepted music of all your music and all the colleagues of the people that I admire, that I'm like, I am inspired by the music you make and your friends make because it's good music and it makes me feel all sorts of things. And I'm like, what's the difference to me?
Yeah.
And to me, like you said, it's all spiritual, yet most musicians I talk to on this podcast too, again, not judging them, but I ask them like, do you have any agenda with your music or a purpose like that? And they're like, not like it's totally agnostic or secular, as you say, like, not at all. People can interpret it however they like. It's just the music. It's just music. And I'm like, interesting. I mean, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I want to push people in because I think it feels good.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think if someone's going to a show, a concert, and, you know, it has this potential to have this very therapeutic, deep, transcendent effect on their spirit, a healing. Do you think that that person going to the show, does it help them to go in with that acknowledgement and intention of the spiritual realm? Or is it like, that's what I'm wondering, is, does it even matter? Is it all just the same amount, sort of quote unquote spiritual anyway? Or do you sort of amplify those effects if you acknowledge that realm and go in with that intention?
You have to meet people where they're at. I mean, I think if they're ready for that kind of depth of experience, then absolutely it can be deeper. But if they're not, there's no point in taking the horse to water. I heard this great phrase the other day. Someone's like, you can bring a horse to water, you can't make him drink, but you can give him a lot of salt.
Right.
And it's like, it was James Fadiman who said that. And I think for myself, my interest has always been, how can we make things spiritual, but in a way that it's inclusive to everyone. There's nothing, anyone could walk into this experience, and if they just have one doorway open to say like, I'll listen, then it's like there's bridges we can make that's like, no, this is a human experience. There's nothing I'm going to say or do or play that's going to trigger you where you're like, oh, now he's talking about dolphins or whatever, vibration. And now I'm not this club. That's not my tribe. You know, it's like, I want to bring the kind of spirituality or feelings that I feel, because I know we all feel them. And through music, it has an ability, and it's happening already. But I do like to really kind of go more directly there, and that's just because that's what I like. But I think everyone's doing it. I do, and I think you go to any show, it's just sort of, it's like, well, this is the level we're comfortable to be at, but you can still have very powerful experiences, and it may be more revelatory, or you know, it may be more this outward energy of celebration and even chaos at times. That's a kind of human experience, but it just, I think if someone does have that intention, hell yeah. I mean, music is an incredible tool.
Yeah.
Incredible tool. And I mean, it can be used as a weapon, you know? And so it's sort of like, if you want to use that tool in ways to it's been used as a tool by shamans and journeys for millennia.
Right.
And so I think it really has a lot of power that a lot of people don't recognize. If they want to, that door is open for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And just on that note, I will say that, in my experience, like, sometimes I might have a more spiritually impactful experience with something that doesn't claim to be spiritual at all, then I would, because sometimes you get people who are pretending to hit the spiritual marks,
Performative.
who
Yeah.
have picked up on somewhere that this works, and they're using all the lingo and all the
Yeah.
terms, but it's a surface thing. It doesn't actually go deep. You know that happens too. So sometimes, you might find a spiritual experience in the least likely of places. Do you know what I mean?
Probably most likely,
Yeah,
right?
maybe
That's
most
how it
likely.
happens. Because it's like any kind of performance, there's a real art to embodying that authenticity while performing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's the $1,000,000 question, is like, how do you really bring out a kind of truth for yourself in an authentic way while still playing that role of, well, we have to connect A to B, and then it's a
Right.
little rise here would be good.
Right.
And that's what makes, I think, great artists and great performers, is like, they really are just coming from their place of like, this is what's true for me, but I found a way to do it that's real, or real. I should say real enough, because it's
Integrity.
always integrity.
Integrity
Yeah,
is the
it's a great
word, isn't it? It's just, yeah. If you can do what you do with integrity, you've got all your bases covered there. I think.
That's a great place to be coming from. I mean, from the outside looking in, it's always seemed like for yourself, you've had that integrity of doing what you want to do. And I mean that as a compliment, to say like, it's coming from someplace real. It's less an idea. It truly is like, I'm interested in this, or this is exciting to me, so I'm going to do this. Like,
Yeah.
you made the album about blackberry and food and foraging because
Yeah.
that's where you were, and it was exciting to you.
Yeah.
It wasn't about like, there's no pandering in that. That's coming from you.
No, I mean, I'm like a record label's worst nightmare, because you can't brand me. Every time you try to say what it is I'm doing, I'm gonna go and change it up. Which I love, but I'm sure I've frustrated many people who are trying to like just logistically sell what I'm doing. But
You've released on many different labels, and is it still for you? Is that a comfortable process that you still believe in, of teaming up with a label to have them work the music? I was oddly thinking about this in the shower today. For some reason, it came to me as like, sometimes these deals feel backwards. So wouldn't it make sense that the label puts it out and maybe they get a larger share at first, but eventually no one's really working that music? It should flip back the other way, or the term ends. It's like, why I saw a major label deal earlier this year. They'll give you like 12% forever.
Wow.
And own the music.
Wow.
And I'm like, but how does that really make sense? No one's really working it after a while, and then they just own it and take the line share. I don't get it.
It's like, because they have the money to throw at it in the start, and you're never going to have that money to, you're never going to be able to put that big of an investment in it. So therefore I do not agree with this model whatsoever. And I do believe there is room for radical transformation in the music business, and not just in the music business, but how we do business and trade with everything. But because I'm in music, I've given a lot of thought as to what the music business is doing. I will say though, in the last few years, I've come to, as you say, I've worked with a lot of different record labels, but I'm going pretty steady with one at the moment that I've been working with. Erase tapes, yeah. And my relationship with that, all the people at that label, and especially with the owner, with Robert, has it's really evolved to a place that I really love. And the thing I love about it is that because I make so much. I'm so kind of not to toot my own horn, but I'm prolific. I make stuff all the time, and if I didn't have some sort of filter over the top of me, I would be putting out an album every month. But nobody's got time to consume that. Nobody, and there's so much music out there. I really feel like there's a lot to be said for just sort of refining what you do and putting out, being conscious of the attention that you're taking from people and really giving them a nice little distilled little nugget of your creativity. So for me, the record label is that. It's the filter that I trust, that I feel so lucky because I feel like Robert at that label, he genuinely loves what I do. I really feel that way. So it feels like someone is interested in what I'm doing, and they also have an opinion about it, which is great sometimes, to be able to bounce ideas off somebody and they're like, yeah, this is great, but that part or that song, let's leave that off, or, it's really helpful. So that's where I feel like a record label is super useful. Yeah.
It's a creative partner.
Yeah.
And I mean, Erase Tapes also it's in a really amazing place and has some amazing artists on that. So, I mean, that's also a really beautiful creative space kind of stuff they're putting out. I mean, you put something out, it was an old recording from Nils Fromm put out that your name is on it.
Yes.
So, but it was like there was a song on there, maybe it was Hammers, which is something I feel like appeared on another album of his.
Yes.
So sort of, were you involved with that re-release?
So here's the story of that.
It just came out. You didn't know about it.
I was aware. I was asked permission if I was okay with it. But that is a recording by Nils from I think it was made in 2009. He went to this place in Austria, Graz, to do some recording, and he came back. And at that time, I was living in Berlin, and Nils and I were pretty close friends, and would sort of share a lot of what we were doing with each other. So he showed me these recordings, and he was actually, asking, like, if you have any input as to what track I should use, or I don't know if he asked me that actually, or if I was just listening to it and giving him suggestions. It's so long ago now, I don't remember. But I was listening one night alone at home, and I was listening to that piece that's called Hammers now. And I decided to just double up what the piano was doing with my voice. Almost like, have you ever had a keyboard that has a scat function? You're like,
no.
Like,
no.
I grew up with these keyboards. It's like, a piano
the
keyboard.
Casios?
But you can press a button for scat, and it's like, doot, 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 doot. And if you really hit one hard enough, it goes, dow. Doot, 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 dow. And so I was almost imagining recreating that with my voice over the top of his piano. So I did it almost just as a joke for him, but also I was completely determined and serious to really get all these different notes. And I brought him over one night and played it for him. And the two of us just laughed and laughed and laughed. We were on the floor with laughter, and he was like, play it again, play it again. But for some reason that record got shelved, and Nils did a bunch of other stuff. But just at the beginning of this year, he wrote and said, hey, we're thinking about putting this out. Are you still okay with, your voice stuff being on that song? And I said, absolutely, go for it.
I thought you were singing into the soundboard. I don't know why.
Okay.
Like it was sort of like getting experimental with singing into piano mics or something.
Uh-huh. Well, it's a funky little thing. I'm really happy it's out there now. It was a fun thing, as you can tell from that little story.
Yeah, and Nils Fromm, I just saw an article he might have done, or was an interview probably for that release, and he was talking about NFTs.
Okay.
And his hatred of them. And it's a subject that's up in the music industry, and I have other musician friends who are quite excited about it, and there's various concerns about it from different angles. I'm curious if that's something that's come across your radar.
Yes, this is kind of funny too, because I was mentioning that I'm quite new to Instagram. So I got my first smartphone less than a year ago, and I started doing Instagram. And a few months after having Instagram, I got a message from a woman from Canada, and she said, "Hey, I'm working on a project where I ask musicians to compose music for some digital artwork, and then I sell it as an NFT. Would you be interested in composing?" And I read it and thought, NFT? What does that mean? I went straight to Google and I typed in NFT, and I read for a few minutes, and I was even more confused as when I started. But I thought, well, she obviously knows what this is. And so I got her to talk to
Maybe.
my publisher and work out a deal. And I thought, well, sure, I can compose a piece of music for you to use for this thing. And so I did, but I still don't really. So let me see if I understand this right. It's essentially like a unique digital file, right?
Even more specifically, think of it like there's a code, a blockchain code. There's a thing that makes it unique, but the file itself isn't unique in itself. You do what's called minting it, and now that particular thing, which could be a song, could be an image, could be anything, it could be an object. You're saying now there's only one. This is a unique one. And think of it as a long blockchain code, that just like there'd be a Bitcoin,
right?
That same technology now is like there's a big code that makes it. It's unique. You can no longer be in it, and now you can track where it goes in the world and who owns that thing. So the digital minting is the thing that you're selling.
I don't get it. I mean, I understand to an extent what you're saying, but I don't get the desire for that. I just can't relate. And as you said that, I could feel the cells in my body kind of recoiling, like, ooh.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, it's not any different really than saying anything we've decided has value.
Right.
Money in itself is sort of a social agreement. And so we say, I've written this song and you want to download it for $1. Technically it's digital, but it is a thing. It's an audio file, and now you bought it and we decided what the rights are to that. Well, with this, it's kind of saying it's another digital thing. Yeah. Or physical thing, and it's the exclusivity of having one, or there's an edition of 10 or 100 that I suppose people want. There's a speculative aspect as well, because there's an assumption that it could go up in value, and so there's like this thing going on where it's like it's really just another like baseball card or a stock that they're like, well, it's about the money. Yeah, and people think that it might go up.
Well, I see two completely flip side coin ways to look at this. On the one hand, and I saw someone write something a month or two ago that said, everyone's so surprised that NFTs are making such a big splash in the music world. Well, we really shouldn't be, because music has been so undervalued for so long. Like, this could be a really positive way of bringing more value to music. And so I thought, okay, that's an interesting argument, counter to what people complain about with Spotify, that no one's getting paid enough. But then there's this other part of me that's like, I just detest that notion of like exclusivity, and I feel like music should be like free for all almost. I wouldn't go like, I don't think anything should necessarily be free per se, but yeah, I kind of feel like I've never personally been bothered by the fact that Spotify pays really low. I see it as like anything that helps expose something that I've made to someone out there. I I see that as a really positive thing. And it maybe they tell their friends, and maybe they come to a concert, maybe they buy a piece of merch from you there in person. So I've never personally been bothered by that, but I can see both of these arguments, you know.
Yeah, and just to point out for the people who know about NFTs, there's environmental concerns about the energy it consumes to create the actual NFT, which is
Oh,
a real thing. That is a real problem.
okay.
And the counter argument to that is that this is something that, let's call it, the industry of crypto and NFTs is saying like they are working on as a problem that they hope to solve, but currently it is not good. So I mean, it's like it's far more than energy than you would imagine. Actually, it's very complicated. The computating power of creating these mints, it has to be verified, and that's through the whole point of it is this open global system of computers. But it could be the equivalent of many plane flights, and if you do that
Wow.
hundreds and thousands of times, it starts to be this exponential of like, this is quite a bit of energy. If you really think about for something like a lot of money, it doesn't even really exist. It's not creating any good in the goods physically in the world,
Right.
like stocks.
Right.
Wall Street is just fake numbers creating more fake
Yeah.
numbers, right? But there is an electrical cost to that, so to speak. So
That's so interesting, and that reminds me of an interesting point. Someone turned me on to this book last year that was all about the environmental impact and cost of the music business from the very start of recorded music. You know, where are these materials coming from that pressed the first records? And how did that evolve into CDs and then MP3s? And what is the sort of basic, they were boiling it down to like greenhouse gas emissions. What
mhm.
what are the environmental cost of these things? And interestingly enough, you would like, maybe you wouldn't think, but I kind of had this false notion that, well, I don't like listening to music digitally, but if it does transition that way, maybe at least that's better for the environment. But just because we don't own a physical thing doesn't mean there's not a physical thing somewhere. In order to power Spotify and the digital streaming world, there's these huge underground bunkers of like machines generating and containing all this stuff. And amazingly enough, the environmental impact of digital music is the same or bigger than music in its physical form with all the plastic and all that. Isn't that
Mm.
unbelievable?
My favorite quote of John McCain when someone asked him what the internet was, he said, "It's a series of tubes." And but that's true, actually.
Right.
Like it's a series of fiber optic tubes and these data centers. And I've seen some of these data centers. They're usually next to rivers because they need that water to cool. It's this incredible,
Wow.
huge, and they're usually near a power station,
Hmm.
like like a hydro or something, coal, because they need incredible amounts of electricity and cooling for the computers, the data that all this information is passing through, whether it's a Google or a Facebook data center. All of the internet is housed on servers at
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
places. And it's, energy is really one of the biggest things on this planet, because if you think about it, really comes down to petrochemicals and coal for electricity. That's most of our geopolitical maneuvering is for that. And
Yes.
besides that, it'd be water and food.
Hmm.
And so if we can ever crack the code, uh, it would be a big deal, to say the least. And but music is something that is becoming more prevalent and more accessible and more important in people's lives. So if anything, it's a recognition fully of then an honoring of what it is. I mean, yeah, I want it to be open source and everywhere, and it kind of is moving more in that direction. It's more available, and there's more music than ever,
Hmm.
and the ability to make it and the creative tools that we have
Yep.
now are
Yep.
like insane, like what we can do. So you're just going to see more of that. And
Hmm.
the only thing I see as being really disruptive for you and I would be sort of AI generated music,
AI composition.
which it's coming,
Yeah.
and it'll get good,
I'll
but
give
it
those
will never
robots a run for
replace.
their money.
I'd love to see Peter Broderick versus the
Yeah.
robots. It's like, but they can't do the live performance thing. And I think if anything, that hunger for witnessing, like you said, that integrity and that
Yeah.
authenticity, that will only grow, because it's like we always need to be touched essentially as humans in different ways,
Mm.
whether it's through music and emotions. And the more it becomes impersonal and just in the ether and digitized, the more you're going to want the vinyl, the more you're going to want to see it right in front of you and hear it.
Yeah.
And someone singing in the audience, like you said, and walking around. And
Right.
that will be more unique.
Right. Yeah, I think one of my hopes, and for the last many years when I've done all this traveling, I've always kind of thought like, oh, it would be great if I could do what I do more and feel just as rewarded and just as impactful, but do it right around me in my community. And my hope is that kind of I could find a way, and that we can all sort of get more involved in our own communities, because I really feel like that's where it's at, getting into creating with the people around you. Um, we it's kind of amazing to think, oh, I'll fly to China to create this experience. Like, why can't I do that here? Meanwhile, I have no relationship to the people who live right around me. It's quite bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm kind of hoping that, as I don't know, we've yet to see how much the world does open back up, and how quickly, and how much of us resume traveling and all this as much as we were before. But I'm hoping that maybe we will sort of come back to getting more engaged with our local communities.
Yeah. And I mean, also when you live, I used to live in New York City, and now I keep going to smaller and smaller places. But then there's less and less of an opportunity for people right around me to play with, or that are sort of in
Yeah,
that scene.
yeah,
And I don't want to go back to the big city
yeah,
thing, or at least living there. I don't
yeah.
mind going there for times. But you're in rural Ireland, right?
That's right.
I mean,
That's right. Yeah,
so
and that's why we
it's
moved.
probably mostly just you,
Yeah,
as far as playing the music.
that's why we moved to London originally. Um, but yeah, of course, when all this stuff started happening at the beginning of 2020, it didn't make sense to be there anymore. But the amazing thing about Ireland is that there's actually a really great and highly alive traditional music culture. There's a lot of people in America that
Right.
are into traditional Irish music, but before the all the the closing of all the restaurants and pubs, you would still be seeing traditional music played nightly in rural pubs in Ireland. And this is a great function of music in a very communal way, where nobody's really on the stage. Different people might take the lead at different times. Sometimes an old man might just start singing, and everybody, even though they're piss drunk on Guinness, is quiet, shuts up, and listens to this man sing his song. So
That's beautiful.
it's really beautiful, and that's still very prevalent here in Ireland. It's something that if I stay here long enough, I'd love to get more involved in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that in itself is a vestige to an old way of music that is more breaking down the walls and more about
Yes.
everyone has a voice. And that's really cool that that's still alive. And I would imagine that is still alive in a lot of parts of the world. It's just sort of this Western energy
Yeah.
of commodification, NFTs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something about how can we turn something into something to sell, and it always becomes an interesting path when it's your job and it's your career. When it's like, okay, this is what I do now for my livelihood. You always want to keep an even keel about that integrity.
Hmm.
About why am I doing this, and where can I lose my way? The shiny things that might come across my path, and you always have to reevaluate. What do I want to do, and what makes sense for me, as opposed to like where the trends are going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think ultimately for me, it's about finding what's useful, you know? because sometimes I might have certain ideas of what I want to do, and I'll be so stubborn about them that I'll see them through and do it. But I might in the end find that it didn't resonate too strongly with too many people. And who knows, maybe it was just ahead of its time, but maybe it's also just not that useful. So yeah, I'm these days I'm trying to humble myself and just be of some use, some service, you know. Yeah.
And how do you see that can happen through your work?
Well, here's a very concrete example. There's a musician that I love named Arthur Russell. This is quite an amazing story, really, because I first heard of Arthur Russell by being compared to him. There was one of the first written reviews of one of the first bands that I was in likened my string playing to Arthur Russell. And Arthur Russell, for those who don't know, was a cellist, American cellist and composer, musician. He died at the age of 40 in 1992. He contracted HIV, and it was during that time where HIV was kind of sweeping through, and AIDS was sweeping through the nation, and he passed away kind of quickly and much before his time, you know. But he was super prolific, recorded tons of music on all kinds of different tape recorders and different technologies while he was alive, and he left it all to his partner when he passed away, a man named Tom Lee. And Tom Lee just loved all of Arthur's work so much that eventually he, found somebody in the music business who could sift through some of this stuff, or the person in the music business maybe found Tom Lee. They found each other and they started putting out all this Arthur Russell music posthumously. And then Arthur became sort of like a cult legend, Arthur Russell. So I was compared to this guy. I started seeing his name, and then I had several people come up to me after some of my first concerts and say, that really reminded me of Arthur Russell. But I never bothered to go and check out who he was. I thought, no, I'm me. I'm not like Arthur Russell. I'm like me. But at some point I was just at a friend's house for breakfast, and they had some music on the stereo, and I said, who's that? And they said, that's Arthur Russell. And I was like, wow, I really like this. And then I went and dug into it and got obsessed with Arthur Russell, and then became influenced by Arthur Russell. So this is a bit of a long-winded story, but it's great. So I'm going to keep going with it if you don't mind.
Sure.
So around 2016, years after I've been really into Arthur Russell, a good 5 years, a friend of mine from Denmark was organizing a festival, and he says, Peter, I know how much you love Arthur Russell. I love Arthur Russell too. Would you come to my festival and play a set of Arthur Russell songs? And I said, absolutely. And he said, I'll put together a band for you. So it was super fun. I learned all these songs. I had a great excuse to learn all these songs by my hero. And I flew to Denmark and got to play with a big band, out in the summer sun at a festival. It was a great experience. And the day after that performance, I got an email from a man named Tom Lee. Tom Lee was Arthur Russell's partner. And Tom Lee says, Peter, I see he saw something online, about the show. I think he has notifications with Arthur Russell's name.
Yeah.
So he says, Peter, I hope you enjoyed your performance of Arthur's songs. It's really great for me and Arthur's family to see someone out there doing this. If you ever pass through New York, let me know. I'd love to meet you. And I wrote back and I said, Tom, wow, I'm so touched to hear from you. I know who you are, of course. I'm not planning to be in New York, but I do have a concert in Maine in a few months. And, maybe I could pass through New York because I'd love to meet you too. And he writes back and says, actually, I live in Maine most of the year. I'll come to your concert. So he comes to the concert. He brings Arthur Russell's niece. He's still good friends with all of Arthur's family. So we meet. We have a lovely afternoon. I play some of Arthur's songs in front of him at this concert. I go home, and then the next few days later, I get another email from Tom saying, "Peter, I'm sending you a few of Arthur's unreleased recordings just in case you might like to learn how to play them." So all of a sudden, I'm being sent unreleased material, archival material by one of my greatest inspirations, right? And I was in tears listening to it because the music was amazing as well. I thought, this should be, why isn't this out there? Some of it had really severe sound issues. Like it sounded like it came off a cassette recorder. It was really hissy. So I did some work and kind of modified the sound so that I could hear the song better. And I sent it back to Tom Lee kind of slightly tentatively thinking, is this weird to send this song back to him and having manipulated it? But he wrote back and said, "Hey, I'm enjoying this more than ever. And in fact, there's lots of work that has to be done like this on Arthur's archives. I'm going to put you in touch with the manager of the Arthur Russell estate." So he did, and then became this couple-year project where I was the guy who was sifting through Arthur's archives and doing audio restoration and stuff. So, and in the meantime, I keep getting asked to play Arthur Russell tribute shows. Since that one festival, I keep getting
You're the guy.
I'm the guy.
You're
So
the guy
they're
now.
like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I see you did this there. Come and do it here." And so I'm like, "Oh yeah, great. This is fun." But at some point I started to feel like, wait, I want to make my own music, but this is where this was the question is what's an example of what you do that's useful versus what you might think you want to do. I at some point I realized, I guess there's a demand for this. I know I never set out to be a tribute artist. I've got my own visions and things I want to do. But if I can be of some use playing the songs of this guy that I love, heck, I'll do it. It's fun. It's super fun. I've had moments where I thought, oh, this is impeding too much on what I want to do. But at the end of the day, 99% of the time, if someone contacts me, which they still do regularly, to do something Arthur Russell related, 99% of the time I'll say yes, because I feel like it's useful.
Yeah, and maybe it's not actually so separate, like
yeah,
doing sort of things that are your voice and his voice, and it's all the service to the same thing. But
yeah,
that's beautiful, man. Yeah, I think about that too sometimes in different ways, and that's a really cool story. I did see. When I was looking at your website, I think you just had done or will be doing another one somewhere.
Yeah,
Songs of Arthur Russell.
That's right. Yeah. It's almost scary how much. Like, I think
it's cool.
You want me to do more Arthur Russell stuff? Okay.
Well, it's not like there's a bunch of other people doing that, so it's kind of like in some ways it is you. You've taken the mantle. It's like a soul walk on. He's like speaking through you in a sense.
So,
and and you're speaking through him. It's your work too.
It is.
And so it is a merging of voices.
Yeah, it's a super interesting project in that way, because I do feel like I would never want to just copy someone, but there's a way to, pay homage to someone, in a genuine way. And I hope that project is that, and there's always going to be people that think, oh, Arthur wouldn't have done it that way or whatever. But, if it's useful, great.
And if it's fun, that's
fun,
cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're doing. It seems like you're in a good place.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your optimistic energy, and it's good to see you making it through this time and continuing to do your thing.
Absolutely, yeah, and you too. I don't know how much you've been keeping your listeners up to date with what you're doing. But if you don't run the risk of repeating yourself a bunch, I'd love to hear a bit what you're up to. I know you're mostly in Boise now, are you? You built a studio there.
Yeah, I'm in it right now.
Yeah.
This is in the back of Rada's house, and then I'm still go down to southern Utah. I'm going there
Okay.
tomorrow, and that's a very unique space. And there's a studio down there that I don't own, but I use. And just started doing a little bit of gigs in the world. I just went to Costa Rica to do an
Wow,
event,
cool.
and just came back from Esalen.
Oh,
Now, people will
great.
probably be hearing this in the bit in the future,
Yeah.
but so some things are starting to percolate back. But we also had to cancel some events, so that
Mm.
was frustrating. And I've started release. I this last year recorded a lot of music, so releasing music, and that's underway. And some interesting collaborations that are coming out and yet to come out that are really fun and exciting. That's been really fun for
Mhm.
me because I mean, some of the better things I feel like I've been working on have been these collaborations, probably because it's got other voices in there, things I never would have thought of, and that's been like kind of they've all been very organic and like, wow, that was cool, and like, you know, and so that's kind of been slotted in here and there.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, man, I'm working on a book, but that's not actually something I've
Oh,
talked about much because
okay.
it's been this really long process that's still going.
Can
And
you pinpoint the
lots.
sort of center focus of that book?
Yeah, I've never talked about this publicly, but it's a book about it's something that I talk about a lot in my live events, and I do this in some of my concerts. They're these ceremony concerts. It's really a concert that involves a bit of meditation and sort of verbal guidance,
Mhm.
and it all centers around this idea of choice and that how can we fully recognize the role choice plays in our lives. And that on one hand seems quite obvious, but on the other hand it's somewhat devious. Just to imagine the analogy that your hand is on the wheel of this ship that is your life, and it's there whether you like it or not. Most of us aren't making conscious choices about
Mm.
our active role in our this thing going forward, but we can, and I would argue we should, because that is what is being asked of us. It's like, where do you want to point this
Mhm.
thing?
Mhm.
And you respond to what happens around you. I can't, I'm not saying you control all that, but you do. You're in conversation with it, and so it's using story to show how this has come up in my life through music, nature, psychedelics, meditation, ritual,
Mhm.
and just life, and try to show a kind of path or recipe that maybe other people could try that works for them, so they can kind of, what are your guiding stars? What are your guiding
Yeah.
principles in life,
Yeah.
in essence?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. That sounds like a great project to
Yeah.
keep you busy as well.
It's been a side thing, which it's a long, kind of boring story about how it's come to be, and then taking a left turn, and then a right turn. But it's continuing to move forward. So that's kind of out there, and the podcast and
Did I hear you're doing another
retreats and things.
project with Ram Dass's archival recordings or something like that?
Yeah, sort of. Just one song
Okay.
with John Hopkins,
Oh, cool.
and yeah, actually, when he and I were zooming, I remember he turned the computer and he's like, "That's erase tapes out the
Oh,
window,
yeah.
like it's
Yeah, yeah.
next door, like it's like there it is." Yeah, so that's coming out. It's just one song inside his album that comes out in the I don't know yet,
Okay.
maybe the fall.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's beautiful, man, dude, beautiful track. He essentially, I made a track and then he worked on it a bit from there. And man, did he ever take that to the next level? I
Cool.
mean,
Oh, I can't wait to hear that.
and a really, yeah, great guy, really sweet. So that's been a joy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Sounds like good stuff.
yeah. Keeping things are staying busy, but still largely doing everything independently. I mean, I've added more people on here and there, like distribution stuff and so forth,
Yeah.
but still management free, for the last year. And
Yeah.
that's a funny phrase, management free, or
Yeah.
in between. It's just,
Yeah.
but that's been good and bad.
Okay.
I mean, things have been going really well, but I do feel a bit overwhelmed as
Sure.
far as
Of
in the
course.
weeds with stuff.
Of course.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, keep on keeping on, man. Thanks so much for. There's been a few interviews that you've done over the last year that have just been really helped me sort of like center and ground myself a lot. Like your conversation with Charles Eisenstein, and
he's a good
you did a conversation with Duncan Trussell recently as well that I just
His
loved.
show,
Yeah. So
you should check out the Bioacco Malafe. Was one of my favorites from last year.
Okay.
He's not as well known, but wow, I met him through Charles, and he is in the similar line of thought of this sort of poetic way of tying it all together, and a beautiful soul.
Yeah.
And that was one that deeply inspired me, and I actually sampled some of that podcast for a song that's coming out later this year of him talking.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, thanks for diving in. I appreciate it.
Hey, before we go, I was going to ask you if this might sound a bit weird, but I had this idea of just trying to do some sort of spontaneous, improvised drone duet with our voices for people. Because it's kind of funny because we're through this technology and there's delays and glitches and stuff, but I just was more curious than anything as to what would happen if we just try and sing together for a moment through that.
Well, I'm curious if I can throw on reverb. Here, hold on. Because I'm coming.
Ooh,
do you hear that?
You got reverb. Wait, I have some reverb too. Hang on.
Well, because I'm on my Apollo.
I have some delay. Check this out. Can you hear that?
Yes. That's a first.
Nice. Thank you for indulging me there. That was fun.
Anytime. Well, thanks, Peter. Always good to see you. We'll do it again sometime. And yeah, appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. Thanks for having me back. Take care of yourself. I hope we meet in the flesh sometime.
Well, that was fun. I always love talking to Peter, and he's always fun for surprises. This song that we're hearing now in the background is called Wild Food, and he was generous enough to allow us to place it here. He's got so much diversity in his music. I encourage you to dive into his world if you haven't already. Stuff that is both joyful and playful, and stuff that is incredibly deep and emotional. He's a real talent. So check it out, and thank you, Peter. And thank you to everyone who can review this podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please give us the 5 stars. Give us a little love, a little support. And if you want to go deeper, you can share it with your friends. You can always say hello on social media. And patreon.com/eastforest if you want to be a supporter and a council member and dive deeper into witnessing one another and seeing where that process can lead. You can join and see what it's like, and you can unjoin later if it's maybe not your thing or your circumstances have changed, but we do appreciate that. More to come, of course, next week, and thank you for being a part of this new Possible album that's rolling out. And go check out the new In album over on the Trip app and see what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, guys, keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.
I'll bet you can guess where that grows, if you doesn't already knows. And if you can't figure that one out, well then somebody ought to tell you that you're dumb as hell. And you ought to eat some wild food, 'cause that'll help you. Wild food, it'll make you smarter. Wild food, come on, dude. There's a little plant called wood sorrel. It's got 3 heart-shaped leaves. Even the kids like the taste of that one. It's a little tart and sour like a lemon, but when I see a patch, I just can't help but go over and snatch. And you can eat the whole plant of red clover, but the flower's my favorite part, and I've heard it's good for the heart. Speaking of the heart, well there's no better plant than old hawthorn. Don't be scared away by the crown Jesus worn. Well, he must have liked his wild food. It used to be all wild food, but now it's rarely wild food. Come on, dude. You work a job for money, spend the money on food, and then you go to the gym and spend more money to get rid of the food. Well, how about spending the day outside, running through the trees? Now that's exercise. Filling up your basket, snacking all the way, eating that delicious, highly nutritious, the best food available on planet